the Monday morning of the Republican National Convention. We fly to Milwaukee we have 3 little kids, and the plane doesn't have Wi-Fi on it. So it's about an hour flight, and I land, and I've got like 350 messages. And one of them is from somebody on the Trump campaign and says, hey, check your phone. Make sure you don't miss a call because a really important call's coming. And about an hour later, I get another message from the same person who says, hey, you just missed a really important call. So I'm like, oh no. So I call Trump and I'm like, hey, sir, what's going on? He's like, JD, you missed a very important phone call. And now I'm going to have to pick somebody else. And the crazy thing about it is my son, who's 7, is in the hotel room with me. And he's really into Pokemon cards right now. So he's trying to talk to me about Pikachu. And I'm on the phone with Donald Trump. And I'm like, son, this is the most important phone call of my life. Please just let me take this phone call. And he doesn't care. He doesn't know what the President of the United States means. So Trump hears him and says, who is that? I'm like, that's my 7-year-old son. He's like, put him on speakerphone. And so I do. And Trump proceeds to read the statement that he's about to put out, making me his VP nominee. And he asks my son, he's like, what do you think about that? And my son's like, oh, it sounds pretty good. You know, hangs up the phone and the statement goes out 5 minutes later. And then my whole life changed.
Wow.
Yeah. But then he actually has me put my 7-year-old son on the phone. You think about this, everything that's happened, the guy just got shot at a couple of days ago, and he takes the time to talk to my 7-year-old. It's a moment I'll never forget. The one thing I didn't realize, this thing that's gone super viral of me kind of doing the Jim from The Office thing, like looking into the camera.
Matter to companies that were over 1,000 more menus of the things that I think the first thing you do.
But it's because the timer is right by the camera. So I was trying to pay attention to what he's saying, but then you have to be ready for like when his time's up because then it's your turn to speak. And so I was looking at the timer to figure
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989.
As a young man, I was just going to teach high school in Fullsend in Guangdong, and was in Hong Kong in May of 89.
But media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
the Tiananmen Square thing. That was the one moment where I realized, okay, he's clearly very uncomfortable.
No, he didn't need your help. He buried himself on it.
Well, it's like the old quote, like when your enemy's making a mistake, don't interrupt them. I was just like, shut up. That was the mental process I had. It's like, do not say a damn thing, JD. Silence.
Can you explain that discrepancy?
Look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on. And then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of 89 to travel to China. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, baseball teams, dancers, and we would go back and forth to China to try and learn. Many times I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China.
Governor, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said.
Actually, President Trump and I were talking about this about a week before the debate. It's like, people really don't know Kamala Harris.
Right.
A lot of people still don't realize she's the sitting vice president. She bears the responsibility. And so, like, why not use this as an opportunity to get the word out about who Kamala Harris really is? But I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. When did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president. And the final point is, you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is, unfortunately, Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I think it's one of the things that people really are turned off by with Kamala Harris, right? It's like, what is your specific plan to solve the inflation crisis? And it was like, oh, I grew up in a middle-class family. Or
when it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? So I was raised as a middle-class kid. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people.
When we talk about bringing down prices, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. She worked very hard.
In 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. You're now his running mate. Why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear?
I've been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. One of the reasons why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. I don't hide from that. I was certainly skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016, but President Trump was a great president and he changed my mind. I think he changed the minds of a lot of Americans because, again, he delivered that peace and prosperity. If you go back to what I thought in 2016, another thing that was going on is I bought into the media's lies and distortions. I bought into this idea that somehow he was going to be a terrible threat to democracy. It was a joke. Again, my wife doesn't love the spotlight. We're doing this fundraiser for Trump in my hometown of Cincinnati. And, raising a lot of money, and then you do photos. The way these fundraisers always work is you do a line of photos, and my wife and I are the last people in line, and he gives Usha a big hug. He's like, Usha, you look so beautiful. I'm so glad to see you. And then he's like, what do you think about politics? And she gives this super diplomatic answer. She's like, well, sir, JD really believes in it, and he really believes in public service, and I'm glad to be supportive of him. And he looks at her and says, yeah, my wife hates it too. It's definitely just seeing so many different parts of the country in rapid succession. And it's just, again, like you see the country, certainly from my own selfish perspective, very new, but from my 7-year-old's eyes, one of the best parts about having kids is you get to sort of relive all these childhood adventures, but from a different perspective, and just seeing America from the eyes of a 7-year-old who's still so optimistic and hopeful, and it makes me optimistic and hopeful about our country, because how can you not be when you see it through the eyes of a 7-year-old kid?
That's true.